me what to do.
Here we go, going live. I never get that music right. Yeehaw, here we go. Hello everybody, Bob Loves the Pond Boss coming at you live on this Wednesday. Glad to see so many people jumping on. I'm not sure who we have so far, but I'm excited. John Funk and Jason Nipstad. Jason, I'm so glad to see you, buddy. Man, it's been a long time. Hey, you don't really need to be giving up your guitar lessons to be watching this, because after all, you could be hosting this. You know that, dude, right? Hey, Matt Nealon, Danny Drollop, good deal. Good to see you folks. I'm waiting for my little feed to show up here, and we will see. Jason's already, he knows how to play the game. I'm going to back this camera up a little bit. Coming at you from the confines of Lusk RV1. For those of y'all that don't know what's going on, David and I are hanging out quite a bit at our RV, which is stationed outside of Brenham, Texas, on our son's ranch. And, man, it's just so much fun. Howdy, Aggie. Kelly Duffy, hey, dude, I got to go watch the Aggies beat University of Texas, or we call them TU, in baseball last night. My son asked me about noon. He says, hey, if I can get tickets, you want to go to the ball game? I said, yeah, heck yeah. You know, it's one of the things about having a simple life that we can go do stuff like that. So Jason Nepstad's done it. He knows the game, knows how to play. If you guys will click like on this video, share it to your timeline, and type in hashtag Pond Boss Magazine, you will be eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat. There's one right there. I've got one hanging on a hook in the RV right now. I might wear it. I don't wear hats much. And a Pond Boss mug. Then, Jason, I know you know the drill. And if we got Jacob West watching, Danny Mac gets it. He's there. I see Danny Mac. Frank, you know the deal. Say it with me so everybody can hear you and knows how to keep hot things hot and cold things cold. So if you'll do those three things, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section or comment line, click like and share this to your timeline, you're eligible for a drawing. And I'll be sure that Leanne does a drawing next week. I thought tonight I'd be talking about aeration. But let me see who else is going on here. Frank James. Hey, Frank. Happy birthday. Yeah, my birthday was Sunday. And, you know, most people get a birthday cake. But you know what? My daughter-in-law, Kat, oh my gosh, that woman, whew, she is amazing. My son married way outside his coverage. She made a homemade, from scratch, cut the apples up, apple pie. And I've got a lot of weaknesses, but that one ranks up in the top one. I love apple pie. So she made an apple pie, and we all shared that on Sunday. And it didn't disappear on Monday, so I got a little hunk of it for breakfast. And it still wasn't gone yesterday, so I got another little bitty piece for snack. It's gone now. All right, there's Christopher Aguilard. He's in the house, South Louisiana. Justin Zimfer, good to see Justin. Tell us about you, Justin. Wayne, hey Wayne, you and Josie are having your Wednesday night date. I love it. We need to get together before long. We'll ring the phone. We're just still we're kind of going through a little transition, although I think we're pretty much there. Let's see here. John Funk up from Michigan. He says, getting close to time to fire up the pond. Justin Zimfer, we probably have some things in common since you said howdy. That tells me that you might very well be an Aggie. I'm going to talk about aeration here in a minute. Mike McPherson from Indiana. Kenny Sanderson building ponds. Bob, or I join ya. Yep, Kenny's up in northwestern Kansas. One of my favorite things about doing this show is getting to hang out with you folks from all over the nation. I mean, we've got Michigan, Kansas, Indiana. We've got South Louisiana. We've got Texas. We've got Northwest Louisiana. You know, Matt Rail. You know, Matt Rail. Check, if you haven't friended Matt Rail, friend Matt Rail and check out his PWRNA website. He is doing some stellar things with a private 501c3 nonprofit organization to spread the word on pond management. Got some outstanding podcasts. Spend a little time with Matt because he's a wealth of knowledge. And one of my favorite things about Matt is he's not afraid to share. He really wants to share with all of us. So he has some great guests. He even had Bill Dance. Legendary Bill Dance is one of his guests. He and Troy Goldsby. Mike Cottrell checking in from Palo Pinto County. Jim 10. Here we go. Bill Russell, South Alabama. Look at that. We got it all covered up. Aeration. Why wait until the temperatures are up? Why not start at 40 to 45 or 50 degrees? I will answer that question. That's a good one. Danny Drallop. Vito, Ola Pond Boss. Hey, Vito, I'm going to, that little note you sent me about your mother-in-law reading Pond Boss, I'm going to put that in Ask the Boss in the May-June issue. So you guys tune in for that. That'll be pretty fun. Jason Nepstad, 8-acre pond with about half full of cypress trees. They don't have the budget to electrofish. I'm planning to order them 4 to 5 inch copper-nosed bluegill. Without knowing much about the pond, how many bluegill would you stock? Plan to add 3 feeders. That's a simple one. I'll knock that one out right now. Stock about 200 per acre. 8-acre pond, 1,600, 4 to 5 inch copper-nose. That's enough. And then feed them, because when you tell me that it's got cypress trees, I got a feeling that if the fish numbers are low, if they don't have the budget to electrofish, if you can stock, a minimum of 50 of bluegill that size, stock up to 200 per acre. If you can do that and then have them feed the fish, spend the money on a good feeder, spend the money on good fish food, Purina's Aqua Max MVP will do the trick. And that will jumpstart their food chain. Do the water chemistry. Be sure you know what the water chemistry is. Chad Roberts, Chris Arthur, Lake Charles, Louisiana. Chris Arthur, you need to know some of these guys. We got Christopher Aguilar, who's not far from there. And Ron Ardoin will show up here in just a little bit. He's in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Starting his young pond management company, Lake Area Pond Management. So let me circle back up here and get John Funk's question. Let me read it again. I passed it up. I'm going to find it. Hold up. No, I'm not going to make you hold up. Here we go. Aeration. Why wait until the temperatures are up? Why not start at 40 to 45? All right, let's do that. I love that question. That's a good, legitimate question. The reason to wait is because when your water temperature's in the 40 to 45 degree range, even 50, the water's autonomous top to bottom. It's not lacking oxygen. Now, when you get ready to aerate a pond, the mission is to move the water, not as much to add air to the water. Now, people don't really know that. Now, I'm going to take you through some of the different methods of aeration in a minute. But what is going on in your pond, John Funk from Michigan, you don't need to start it because it doesn't need the water to be moved yet. The time to move the water is just before it starts to warm up in the spring, which in the south is right now. But in the northern tier of states, I'd wait another month, 3 weeks, whatever. Measure your water temperature. When your water temperature at the surface is in that 55 to 60 degree temperature range, then crank up your aeration system. Now, one thing to do that's just good business, good planning, is don't kick on that aerator and let it run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Let it run for half an hour, then run the next day for an hour, then the next day for 2 hours. Do that every day till you build it up to 24/7. Now, what aeration does is it doesn't really aerate the water. What it does is it moves it vertically. Now, think about it like this. How does a pond get oxygen added to it naturally? Raise your hand if you know. Oh, there's Matt's hand is up. Holy cow, Frank's hand is up. Wayne's hand is up. You guys know this, but everybody else that doesn't understand it, the only way that oxygen is dissolved into the water is from photosynthesis from plants and communicating with the atmosphere. So when the water hits the atmosphere, it gives off its excess gases, which might be carbon dioxide, might be hydrogen sulfide gases. You know, when you smell that rotten egg smell, that's water eliminating itself of that gas. But it can absorb oxygen. Water's kind of like a sponge. If it needs oxygen, it will absorb it. But in order for it to do that, it's got to contact the atmosphere. Now, in the water, there's all kinds of stuff using oxygen. You've got water that's home to all kinds of detritus. Big word. That's muck on the bottom. That's junk, organic matter that's trying to decompose. It decomposes more quickly, decomposes quicker. Oh, here's the editor coming out of me, sorry. In the presence of oxygen. So it's consuming oxygen. Fish consume oxygen. Plants consume it when they're respiring. produce it when they're photosynthesizing. So as the days get longer, plants are producing oxygen more hours of the day than they do in the winter when the days are short. Lubricate my throat already. Heck, we've been at it 11 minutes, or actually 10 minutes. So what aeration does, especially if you're using bottom diffused aeration, which is one of the most highly recommended aeration methods, is you're sending high volumes of low pressure compressed air from a compressor through a weighted hose to the bottom of your pond into a diffuser that breaks that air up into billions of little microscopic bubbles. It looks like Alka-Seltzer bubbling up through the water. So you get these columns of bubbles cascading to the surface. And as that happens, you kind of think, well, that stuff will aerate the pond. It really doesn't. It moves water vertically, where nature moves water horizontally. Think about it like this. When the wind blows, it's pushing waves. Now the waves, the faster the wind blows, the bigger the waves are. What happens when the wave hits the shore? Think about that. It dissipates a little energy, but it can't dissipate all of it. So when that water blows across in the form of a wave and it hits the shore, it turns under and goes the opposite way. So you've got horizontal circulation. Well, that can only go down so far. It doesn't plummet to the bottom. It kind of turns into a almost an ellipse and moves like so. Well, as the water warms up, now keep in mind that water at 39 degrees is the densest water can be. If you weigh a jug of water at 39 degrees, that's the heaviest it can be. As the water warms up in the springtime, it gets less dense. It expands, so it's lighter. So when the sun's warming the water, it's that warm water wants to rise to the surface. Water cooler than that sinks to the bottom. So what happens is you end up with a warm layer of water sitting on top of a cooler layer of water because the heat can only go down so far. The water's expanding as it warms up. So you end up with a layer cake. And dividing that layer cake, the top layer from the bottom layer is called the thermocline. Those end up being two separate layers of water because the heat can't push down but just so far. Now typically in a pond, that's halfway. So if you've got a pond 18 feet deep, your thermocline is probably going to end up being about 9 feet. If your pond's 8 feet deep, your thermocline is going to be maybe halfway down, 4 feet. So when you're thinking about that, keep in mind that you can only put, or the pond only puts oxygen into the layer that's active and alive, which is the water above the thermocline. So now going back to John, your question is, why do you wait? Well, the water's autonomous right now. It's got oxygen top to bottom, unless you've been under ice a lot. But as your ice comes off, water begins to absorb oxygen, and then as it begins to warm up and wants to begin to stratify and form those layers, that's when you want to, before that happens, that's when you want to kick on your aeration system. So get it moving and get your water moving. And then what happens is when the aeration system's doing its job, it's taking water from the bottom and pushing it upward with that motion of the bubble plumes. Now, there's other aeration methods. One of my favorites for other reasons are circulators. I've seen some circulators do some amazing things to improve a fishery. Casco Marine, for example, they're the inventors and leaders in our market for water circulators. It's where you can attach a circulator, tie it down, kick it on, and it moves the water laterally. It can move it diagonally down. It can move it diagonally up, but it causes a current. And as long as that water's communicating with the atmosphere, you're going to see an increase in oxygen levels. Now, Matt just winced a little bit. Matt, let me back up a little bit. If you've got huge amounts of aquatic plants, or you got a heavy plankton bloom, you can aerate till the cows come home and not necessarily influence oxygen. So there are other things going on with the biology and the chemistry, more so biology than chemistry, of your pond water that can keep an aeration system from preventing an oxygen depletion. If you've got more plants consuming oxygen, especially during like a heavy rainstorm in the summer, or if your plankton bloom is too dense, or if you got blue-green algae, they can consume oxygen faster than an aeration system can push water up to absorb or dissolve more oxygen. So, there's the start. There's a start on that. Let me scroll down here. Chad Roberts. Yeah, Chris Arthur. Okay, well, that's cool. Ron's helping you guys out. I love it. Chuck Brinkman checking in from west of St. Louis. Chuck is growing some stellar fish. I mean, he's feeding the fish. I tell you what, Chuck, you need to be thinking about aeration. If you're not doing that yet, we need to talk about that, because with your fish growing so fast and you're just now beginning to think about harvesting, and you've got these giant bass, giant catfish, giant bluegill out west of St. Louis in a fairly small pond, your next limiting factor is going to be water quality. Because if you keep cranking the feed to those fish, fish consume it, they convert it well, there's still waste. And if you don't have a lot of water flushing through from fresh rain, then your pond water is going to have to cleanse itself. Aeration helps expedite cleansing of water. So that's another reason to do it. I mean, there's not a fish farm around that doesn't aerate their water. Catfish farms in the Mississippi Delta, they've got these big, giant mechanical aerators hooked up to electric sources that look like big paddle wheels on those dead-gum boats on the Mississippi River where you like to go have dinner, that used to be a big way of traveling up and down that river. But those big old paddle wheels crank out the oxygen by moving the water and churning it. You know, so churning the water, moving it with diffused aeration, that's a good thing to do. Circulators are a good thing to do. Another aeration method is fountains. Now, fountains, you know, they're more for show than they are for aeration, because most fountains tend to draft shallow. So if they're picking up water from just a few feet under the surface, they're not really circulating enough water. Here's the key, here's your take-home point for aeration. You've got to figure out how to get more of your water to contact the atmosphere to release its gases and absorb gases. You do that, your aeration is going to help. But if your nutrient input is heavier than what the water can process, even when the water's being moved, or you've got too much plant life, or you've got too dense of a plankton bloom, then the aeration system is not going to do the things it needs to do to totally prevent a fish kill. You can put it off, but you're going to do other things to manage the density of the nutrients that are feeding whatever's growing, whether it's plants or plankton. There we go. Hey, there's Chico. Hey, Chico. Mike Garcia. I'm so glad Chico's here. I've got a meeting tomorrow with our web developer. Chico is our go-to videographer. He's created our content, our premium content that's going to go live here pretty quick. Now, I'll know tomorrow after I sit down with the web developer, he's got the website built. Now he's getting ready to plug in these videos. We've got like 22 videos that are going to be premium content on topics everywhere from basic pond management to aquatic plants to fish identification to fisheries management. We've got some great speakers on there as well. So that content is almost ready to go live, and if it wasn't for Chico, we wouldn't have this stuff. He created the intros, the outros, edited, got it all put together where it's a functional, viable deal. Now, if any of you guys out there are looking to produce a video for your business or your company or, you know, for yourself, man, get in touch with me or connect with Chico right here. Just friend him and talk to him about it, because he's got all the cameras, he's got all the, and better yet, he knows how to do it. That's a big deal. I mean, I can go do a video. Hell, we're doing one right here. You heard what I did to the music at the beginning. I butchered that. I do that every freaking Wednesday. Butcher the music. Hey, Mr. Pond, I should sing it, although I can't sing. So, let's see. Frank James says, I've been harvesting 8 to 14-inch largemouth bass unless they're fat. What would you do with the little guys, sub 8 inches? Release to feed the big ones or harvest to limit how many forage fish? Harvest them. Now, here's the backstory on Frank. Frank James has got Frank, help me out here. I think your lake is like 8 to 10 acres. It's in northeast Texas, not far from Marshall, not far from the Louisiana line. The lake's been stocked, I think, about 5 years. So the bass have been reproducing now for at least 3 years. So now he's in a position where he needs to be culling bass. So where he's coming from is he's been harvesting 8 to 14-inch bass unless they're chunky. So he is doing a selective harvest program on his lake. Now, every single lake is, look at it like a garden. You're going to grow fish. At some point, you got to harvest fish. Now, part of Frank's goals, and some of this is goal dependent. So one of Frank's goals is he truly does want to grow some giant fish. He stocked F1 tiger bass, he stocked Florida bass, copper-nosed bluegill, native bluegills. He's got hatchery ponds right beside his lake where he can open a valve and dump fish in or seine them and move them over. So he's pretty serious about this fish growth stuff. But what his mission is to grow some really, really big fish. He knows he needs to harvest some bass. So his harvest protocol right now are bass 8 to 14 inches long, unless they're chunky. If they're chunky, if their relative weights are above 100, maybe even 110, whatever his mission is, then if they're above 110, he's going to release them. If they're below, say, 100, he's probably going to be taking those fish out. Now, here with all that together, when his question is should I take the sub 8-inch bass out? Yes. Here's why. If you've got 8-inch bass now, let me lubricate. The pause that refreshes. If you've got sub 8-inch bass, those fish are almost a year old. After a year, a fast-growing, healthy bass is going to be knocking on the door of 12 to 13 inches. So if you've got bass right now, end of March, 1st of April, that are 8 inches long, cull them. They're not going to add to the food chain, although something might eat them. But what we know is, here we are, end of March, 1st of April. If your bluegill haven't spawned yet, they're getting ready to. So what that means is those little 8-inch bass, think about how big their mouth is. About like that, right? If I can hold it right. Yeah, that's about how big their mouth is. What will they eat? I mean, we're going to interject as much common sense into this fisheries management stuff because that's really what it is. If you have an 8-inch bass, what's it going to eat? 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch to 1-inch bluegill, up to 2-inch bluegill. If those bluegill get eaten, they can't grow up to be 3 to 5-inch bluegill to support your target species size. So you want to be feeding bass that are 16, 17, 18, 20 inches. The only way to do that is to have those bluegill get bigger. Because remember, it takes 10 pounds of bait fish for a game fish to gain 1 pound. So if you're feeding 10 pounds of 8-inch long bass that are 6 to the pound, so if you're feeding 10, that's 60. If you're feeding only 60 of those little boogers to get them up to a pound, you're feeding 600 pounds of bluegill. It's better if those bluegill get a chance to get bigger. So that's a long answer, so I can burn some time. Not really. Well, yeah, really. And so call those 8-inch bass. They're not big enough where they should be now, and they're feeding too low on the food chain. Get rid of them. Hey, Fred Bingaman. Good to see you, buddy. Yep, look at there. Christopher Aguilar, he taught Ron everything after Bob taught me. Yeah, you guys are on the Boudin Trail over there. Hey, Kevin Briggs. Good to see you from North Carolina. Travis Ball Smith, Southeast Texas. He is our go-to ambassador for Aquamax Fish Foods. So let's just take a minute. It's almost 7 o'clock. I do want to take a minute and thank our sponsors. We've had several phone calls for more people to sponsor the show, for which I'm thankful for. I always want to thank Purina Mills. Since we first reached out to them in 1995, and not only did we reach out to them, they reached back to us. And I'm telling you, they have been an outstanding ambassador for our industry. I'll put it that way. They have gone to great lengths and some good expense to create some of the best products out there. Their Aquamax line of fish foods, Purina's Aquamax MVP, 400, 500, 600 sport fish products, even the game fish products. Those are all good products designed for you and for me, for our sport fishing ponds. That's what they're for. Let's go ahead and do a little commercial. Pond Boss Magazine. Inside front cover is Purina Mills. They have had the inside front cover since we first started. Well, not really. Since 1995. They've also had the back cover for a good part of the time that Pond Boss has been alive. And we thank them for that. $35 a year, by the way, for Pond Boss Magazine. You folks that watch this show, you know what I'm getting ready to say. $35 a year. You're going to get several nuggets out of each issue that will help you. You're going to get a broad-based, better education on how to take care of your private waters when you spend that $35 for 1 year. Plus, that's what fuels the economy to keep things going like this show. $35. Think about that. I took Debbie to, she wanted to meet me at a Mexican food restaurant in Brenham, Texas, near where we're hanging out. And we met yesterday, and we spent $35 on lunch. And $8 was for guacamole. You know what? And that was gone like today. So here's $35. Go to palmboss.com. You can subscribe there. Also, to tell you more about the resources that you've got available, at palmboss.com, you've got the Ask the Boss website discussion forum. You've got this Facebook page. We've got YouTube. On the Palm Boss website, we've got a discussion forum, lots of free articles, lots of free videos, and some podcasts. And I'm working to create more podcasts as time allows, so we'll have some more of that going on. Also want to thank Texas Hunter Products. I think they're the best fish feeders on the market. Not only that, they have the best customer service. I placed an order yesterday at $336 for a feeder for a client that wanted 2 feeders. So I placed that order for him. I got a confirmation email 10 minutes later that they'd been ordered and would be shipped today. And I don't know how you beat that customer service. Chris Blood watches this show, and he's one of the guys that spearheads that business. And I love Texas Hunter, not only because of the customer service, but because the products are great. You know, you can buy, especially the LM series of products, which are lake management products, where you can put 2 bags of fish food in it, last 6 or 8 weeks. You never have to worry about the timer. You have to worry about the motors. And on that rare occasion when a motor goes out, they're up to fix it really, really fast. They're very responsive. Also want to thank David Schneiderman, Easy Docks of Texas. If you're looking for an easy dock or looking for a dock for your lake, they build floating docks. And we're talking to a couple other sponsors as well. I'll talk about them after we get to it. Ron Ardoin cooks a great sausage and gravy. All right. Looks like I'm about 15 minutes behind. Let's go. Travis got his new Aquamax MVP. 2 sacks lasted 4 months. There you go. Hey, Scott Hohensee. I'm glad to see Scott. Scott is one of the go-to guys with Purina Mills. He focuses more on the wildlife side of things, feeding deer, but he knows as much about Aquamax line of products for feeding fish as anybody in their company. So, friend Scott, go to Scott and talk to him about if you want to feed your deer, if you want to feed wildlife, you want to feed birds, game birds, quail, pheasant, upland game birds, talk to Scott. You can also talk to Scott about fish food. So, click on his, go visit with him. Brock Wren, Dan Snyder, trying to get Dan to watch. Chance Birch, hey Chance, good to see you, buddy. Jim 10, my half-acre pond maintains its water level using a 1.5-inch pipe just dumping into it. Question is, would it be better to have the pipe below the surface about a foot or so to help with aeration? I currently have an aerator in the pond. Your thoughts? Well, I'm going to tell you what I think. Where's the water coming from? If it's an 1.5-inch pipe, if it's from a well, wells don't have oxygen. Water coming out of the ground is void of oxygen. It's better to break it up. And for a half-acre pond, is that what it said? Yeah, half-acre pond, 1.5-inch pipe dumping into it. If you're running full bore from a well, you do need to aerate that water. If you don't, because an 1.5-inch line running full bore is 50 to 70 gallons a minute, maybe more. So do the math on that. 1 acre, 1 inch deep is 27,000 gallons. So a half-acre pond, if you're replacing that water with a well pretty quick, you can, in the right circumstances, you can have not enough oxygen. So the bottom line answer is yes. Harrison Davis checking in from Georgia. Good to see Harrison Davis. Let's see what else we got going on here. There's Jeremy Duckworth, top fan. Good to see him. Jeff Thompson from the Carolinas. New build hatchery pond with clay particles suspended in the water column with 10 to 12 inches of visibility, trying to clear it with gypsum. Would you be concerned with stocking it now with bluegill? Absolutely not. Stock it. What will happen if you're going to clear a pond with gypsum, it's only going to dissolve enough gypsum to do the job. It's not going to... Now, gypsum is calcium sulfate, where limestone is calcium carbonate. And that the water where clay particles are suspended tend to have high amounts of bicarbonate, which will, chemically will buffer. My nose itches. If your nose itches, it means somebody's coming to see you, right? No, I don't see anybody coming yet. Well, I do see some folks over there at the house. That means supper's probably ready. Okay, no, I would not be concerned with stocking bluegill. It's not going to drastically change. It's not going to drastically change the pH. It's not going to change. It'll change the chemistry, but in a good way, not a bad way. Stevie Anderson. That's a new one, new person. Half-acre newly constructed pond, stock hybrid bluegill and bass only. Hybrid bluegill, let's do this. Let me answer that this way. Hybrid bluegill do not reproduce. Well, that's not quite true. They reproduce a little bit. So if you want to stock largemouth bass, you need a sunfish in there that's going to reproduce adequately enough to create a food chain. Bluegill are the backbone of the food chain in bass lakes. So hybrid bluegill don't reproduce enough to be able to support a largemouth bass population. So hybrid bluegill, what their job is to grow big. Their mouth is a little bigger than a bluegill because they're a hybrid cross between green sunfish and bluegills. Their mission in a pond or a lake is to grow big, be easy to catch, especially on light tackle or fly tackle. So I would not look at hybrid bluegill for bass. In a half-acre pond, you can have bass. You're just not going to grow a lot. You know, a half-acre pond, and keep in mind now, if you're going to manage a pond naturally, meaning minimal amount of feeding, minimal amount of fertilization, a pond is going to grow 50 to 75 pounds of bass per acre. That's a good standard rule of thumb for an average pond with very little management. So if you've got a half-acre pond that's growing 25 to 35 pounds of bass per acre, that could be 6 fish. That could be 60 fish that weigh half a pound. You know, that could be 40 fish that average a pound, a little bit less, you know. So that's not quite big enough to naturally manage for a largemouth bass and expect a lot of growth rate from them. But it's a good one for channel catfish and hybrid bluegills. It's a good one if you got feed trained largemouth bass. Purina makes a great fish food to feed trained bass, Aquamax largemouth. You know, so I would look at if you're looking at hybrid bluegill, don't expect much growth from your bass. You need bluegill to grow bass. Ken Dowd, good evening. Chuck Brinkman looking into aeration. Good. I think you need to do that because the last thing I want to do is get that call from you from all those fantastic fish that are giving you so much joy and your girls are catching. I don't ever want that text where you're showing me fish that aren't doing well, as in like dead. So look at aeration. Brock Wren, Pond Boss, is 3 feeders on a 10-acre pond too much? No, that's about right. 1 feeder for every 3. I like 1 feeder for every 3 acres. The feeder companies will tell you 1 for every 5 acres. So 3 feeders on a 10-acre pond is not too much. Is 1 feeder on a 5-acre pond not enough? No, that's fine. That's fine. We currently have 3 feeders feeding our trophy pond and 0 feeders on the 5-acre. Should we move 1 feeder to the 5-acre or focus on growing? Let me see here. Hang on a minute. I'm having a hard time navigating here. Let's see here. Should we focus on growing the biggest fish? Okay, I tell you what. If you're limited by budget on buying another feeder, go ahead and move one of those feeders to the 5-acre pond and then increase the frequency of the feedings on the 10-acre pond. So, in other words, if you're feeding twice a day right now, move 1 feeder to the 5-acre pond, bump it up. And once the fish really start to find that feed 3 times a day or even 4 times a day. Do the same thing on the 10-acre pond. So if you've got 2 feeders on the 10-acre pond and they're feeding twice a day now, bump them up to 3 times a day. And once you see the feeding increase, bump them up to 4 times a day or increase the time that they're spitting out feed. If you're feeding for 5 seconds, bump it to 8 or bump it to 10. That's what you need to do. I just saw Stephanie Vidring come on board. Stephanie, holler at me if you haven't found somebody to electrofish your lake there yet. Let's see here. John Henry, a little late, but made it. And I have a question. 1-acre pond, trees growing all the way around to the bank, all the way to the bank, even into water in the spring. Would it be good to remove them by cutting down to about 30, 40 feet from the high water line? Depends on how long your water is at high water, how long the water line is. And it depends on the kinds of trees. I would just about bet that you're talking about willow trees. I would say, you know, what's making me slow down a little bit is I don't know 30 to 40 feet. I think that's probably almost horizontally from the high water line. If they're willow trees, cut them down. If they're softwoods, cut them down. If they're hardwood trees that aren't on the dam and you like them and the water doesn't encroach on them all the time and you like those trees, leave them up. So that's the answer I'm going to give you. Frank James, 8 acres, 21 feet maximum depth, largemouth bass stock 5 years ago. Yep, okay, that's kind of what I remembered. Jeff Wallen, Central Illinois, water temperature 52 degrees, bluegill feeding and some catfish feeding also. That's it, man. I got it. That's right. Cool. Travis is getting ready to turn the timers up. Weather's getting right. He's right. Dave Weber, confused about aeration now. If the goal is to mix the water, why not use a water pump to recirculate bottom water to the top or pump top water to the bottom? Is moving air that much more cost effective? Absolutely, yes it is. Anytime you could pump air through a high volume, low pressure compressor, it costs way, way, way less money with power and the equipment than it does to move the water. Plus, when you're moving water through a pump, just think about this. When you're pumping cold water off the bottom of a pond and you're shooting it across the top of the pond, that cold water doesn't lose its density fast enough. It sinks right back to the bottom. It takes a long time of circulating water through a pump to really get it to mix, to get the temperatures where they're autonomous top to bottom. It costs a whole lot less money to move air. Shane McAdary, sorry I'm late. I just finished watching Godzilla vs. Kong. Yeah, I'd be watching that too. I didn't know that was on. The week is great. Shane McIntyre. Spencer Cree's got a 7.5 acre private pond, crappie, bluegills, bass, and walleye. Average 6 feet deep, deepest spot's 14, average bass 14 inches, bass up to 10.5 pounds. What would be a good size to call? I'm going to tell you this. Tell you exactly what you need to do, Spencer Crees. Weigh and measure fish. For those of you that don't have the spreadsheet for largemouth bass, it helps you judge your fish. You can email me and I'll send it to you. Or here's something even better. Go to Smartfish app. My very good friend over in South Carolina created the Smartfish app. And fisheries biologist, been in it forever. And if you download that, it's free. And you can plug in the length and the weight and it will give your fish a score. And if your fish scores less than 100, if it scores less than 90, it needs to come out. If it scores 90 to 100, you got to decide. If it scores 100 or better, for most circumstances, leave it in the lake. Now, what you need to do is you figure out what your lengths and weights. And what you'll do is as you measure your lengths and weights and you compare those fish to standard lengths and weights. For example, a 10-ounce bass is 10 inches. A 12-inch bass should weigh 12 ounces. 14-inch bass, 1 pound, 7 ounces. A 16-inch bass should weigh 2 1/4. 18-inch bass weighs 3 1/4. Well, if you're, and you can plot those on an XY graph, and get a curve that shows the standard weight. If yours is within 5% of that standard curve, they're healthy. They're normal. If they're not, then you need to decide what to do about it. If they're way beyond it, bigger, keep them in the lake. So your bass are going to tell you which ones to call. That 10.5 pound bass, he's eating those 14-inch bass. Or she is. She's not going to have any issues. She's going to be able to live a long, happy life. As a matter of fact, already has. Let's see here. Thomas Willis from North Carolina. I got a 3 acre pond. How long should I set my Texas feeder? I've got it set at 1 second in the morning and won't even bump that up to 4 seconds. Thomas, bump it up to 4 seconds. See how your bluegill respond to that. And if they consume all that feed within about 15 seconds, bump it up another 2 seconds. In a 3 acre pond, you should go through a bag of fish food, a pound. Good gosh, I just washed my tongue and I can't do anything with it. If you go through a 50-pound bag of fish food in about 3 weeks to a month, that's about right. So you should be feeding around 2 pounds a day to 2.5 pounds a day in a 3 acre pond. And with a Texas Hunter feeder, that's going to be 4 seconds and up. I think 10 seconds probably feeds 1.5 pounds. So judge it by how much the fish eat. Hello, Dan Reasoner. Mike McPherson, a half-acre pond, 25 feet deep in the center. How will 2 diffusers affect the thermocline? Will it be too much aeration? I'll tell you what I would do, Mike. Set your diffusers at about 18 feet, 16 feet. Now, one thing about it, depending on where your pond is, if you're in the south, your diffusers can create an autonomous temperature that gets too hot in the summertime. And bass don't like that, especially. Bluegill tolerate it, but when you don't have the happiest water, your fish are going to be struggling. So where I'm going with this is to tell you that if you're in the south, Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, even parts of Arkansas, where the temperature can get pretty hot, in the summertime, set your aeration to go from like 9 at night till 9 in the morning, where you're not moving water up to contact the heat of the atmosphere in the hottest time of the day. So you want to keep your water temperatures below about 83 degrees. If you can do that, then your bass are going to be fine. So that's I think one of the important things of having an aeration system is get a thermometer, check your water temperature. Mike, to be specific, I would set my diffusers at about 16 feet, especially if you've got a flat surface you can set them on. And that way you're going to aerate the top and leave the next, 8 feet, 9 feet of depth for thermal refuge. And you're still going to get what you need. You're just going to cause the thermocline to go down a little deeper. Now, there's a little caveat there. So I have seen some ponds, especially that are bowl-shaped, where even when you set the diffuser shallower, it still impacts that deeper water. So that's a good reason to be going out in a boat, checking your temperature down in deeper water. And you can do that with a mercury thermometer on a cord. But if you're really serious about it, I would be doing that. Let's see here. Ron, going on vacation. Cook something. Attaboy. Vito, rookie question. Bluegill or gut swallowing Jackson's hooks? We read the best chance for survival is to cut the line. He uses number 6 hooks. Should he use larger hooks or is Dad baiting hooks? Nope, it's the hook. Here's what you need to do, folks. If you're catching bluegill, they're swallowing the hook. Go to the tackle store, Walmart, box stores, local bait stores, and buy some 1/32 ounce jig heads. That's what you need to get. They're a shorter shanked hook. They'll sink, but the fish can't swallow them. That's the problem. When you use these long shanked brim hooks, they have a tendency to swallow them. The direct answer is cut the line, push the hook on down, and odds are good they'll digest part of it. So now a better answer is to go buy some, and I learned this from Bruce Candello, and Bruce checks in often on this show, 1/32 ounce jig heads, and he likes yellow or chartreuse. And you can put a little, tip it with night crawler and put it under a bobber, and you'll catch fish and they won't swallow the hook. There we go. John Henry, oak and cedar. If it's got oak trees growing there, I'd leave those alone. I'd cut the cedars. Jim 10, hello Stevie. Looky there, you guys are going to have a conversation. Harrison Davis, I was delighted to see more turtles recently in a pond I'm helping care for. What can an influx in slider turtles be indicative of? What do sliders typically eat? Well, here's what I tell people about sliders. If a slider, red ear slider, or any other species of slider eats a fish, the fish deserved it. Healthy fish can get away from sliders, but sliders are there because their food source is there. Their habitat's perfect. They got places they can get in the sun, lay on a log. I've seen 30 sliders on a log before. It looks like somebody gut shot something when they all fall off the log at the same time and the ripples run across the pond. But one of the reasons they're there is because there's a feeder going off feeding the fish. So I do know that turtles are natural. They're part of the habitat. But I also know if you got too many of them eating your fish food and they're disrupting spawns of bluegill and bass, it's okay to show some of them their Second Amendment rights or trap them and take them to a neighbor you don't like. No, I didn't say that. Let's see here. I'm catching up slowly. Dan Drollop. I recently cut down all small trees and shrubs on the dam side that were never kept up. But I have 3 that are 5-gallon bucket size in width and about 10 feet or so down the back side of the dam. Should I cut or no? Here's the general rule of thumb for that, folks. If a tree is 4 inches in diameter, or smaller, cut it down. If it's 4 inches or bigger, leave it, because the root ball, in typical root ball, like on an oak tree, for example, maybe 4 feet deep and goes and extends pretty much to the drip line of the tree. So if you cut down an 8-inch in diameter oak tree, you've got a 15-foot diameter root ball that's 4 or 5 feet under the ground that's going to rot. And as it rots, those roots are going to leave a void in the soil, which can weaken that part of the dam. So it's better to let those trees go ahead and grow up until you have to do something else with the pond later. Billy Miller. Hello, Billy Miller. Good to see you, buddy. It's an indication that you need to get out your 1022 and apply lead treatments. There you go. All right, we're talking about turtles there, looks like. Kelly Duffy. I reconned a large private lake last week that had a significant bladderwort infestation, literally a monoculture. Any thoughts or experiences with bladderwort's impact on a pond or lake's natural food chain in view of this plant's diet? Oh, man, I love that, Kelly. And Kelly's the expert about this. Well, here's the deal. Bladderwort makes most of its living by eating insects, like the Venus flytrap. It's got little bladders on it that can capture insects. So an insect grows on it, the little bladders close on it, and they absorb that insect. So my experience with bladderwort is it tends to grow more in acidic waters, although I found it in waters with some alkalinity. Most of the lakes where I find bladderwort, Kelly, it's not a monoculture. It's more of the bladderwort thrives during its window of opportunity until other plants can outcompete it. But in the case where it is a monoculture, we don't want that, whether it's bladderwort or bushy pondweed or coontail. Now the thing about bladderwort, it's not rooted. Bladderwort migrates with the water movement. So when the water has currents, like when a rainfall, I've watched bladderwort almost clog up a spillway during a fast-moving flood, where the lake was full of bladderwort, it rained hard, a foot of water hit, pushed the bladderwort, about half of it, over the spillway, and it piled it up like a windrose. And so any thoughts or experiences with bladderwort's impact? I think its impact on a lake's natural food chain, I think it's going to eat what it eats, but that's voluntary. Whereas a pond I can't see bladderwort negating or completely interfering with the natural food chain, but what I can see it doing is taking up so much space that consuming the space that it consumes, especially in the top 3 feet of water, it can eat up a whole lot of habitat that otherwise would be inhabited by fish that are eating what's living in the bladderwort. So my less complicated answer is this. I think what I've seen with bladderwort, I haven't seen it disrupt insect production in water. I have seen it interfere from time to time with other species of plants. However, for the most part, it seems to go away when the water temperature goes up. But when it's a monoculture and it consumes more than about 40 or 50% of a lake surface, I think it needs to be treated. Let me go that way. Let's see. Okay, let's see here. Stevie Anderson. Okay, let me see here. Okay, we got other conversations going on. That's pretty cool. Kyle Edwards. I used to like our ducks till I started trying to feed the fish. If you're feeding the fish by hand, I tell you what to do. Here's what you can do. If you will set up just a small feeder on the shore, especially on the back side of the dam, and you let it dispense some corn, or you feed the ducks a little bit of corn and lure them away from the pond to eat. And I've done this and it works. It takes some work. You got to work at it. It's kind of like trying to have purple martin boxes. You just can't put them up and expect purple martins to do what purple martins do. You got to work at it. But you can get those ducks eating corn and move them away from the pond. If you want to keep the ducks, pregnant pause here, if you want to keep the ducks, feed them away from the pond, let them eat corn. Now, if they're eating your fish food, one thing you can do is set the fish feeder to go off at 2 in the morning. That'll put a stop to the ducks. Okay, let me see what else we got here. I'm going on down here. Travis Paul Smith, Smart Fish app. That's right. That's it. You know what? I absolutely love it that you guys are interacting with each other. I think that's just cool as it can be. Okay, looks like I've gone through the majority of the questions that I can see. I see Dion Myers and John Shannon watching. All right, so let me kind of circle back on the aeration topic. Billy Miller's got one coming at me. Let's see here. How do I measure nutrient levels, and then how can I lower nutrient levels if they're as high as I expect they are? Billy, the best way to do that is when the water temperature is warming up, check your visibility. Now, you can send off a water chemistry test. You can send it off to the, there's two places that I like to use. Honestly, I just found out about one of them. I didn't know it was there, and I should have. But Texas A&M's got an aquatic diagnostics lab where you can go onto the website, look up Aquatic Diagnostic Lab, Texas A&M University. If you can't find it, let me know and I'll send you the link. Then info@pondboss gets me. And then they will diagnose things that are growing in the water. They will diagnose the nutrients you have. But I also use the Soil Sciences Lab at Texas A&M to look at nutrient levels. Now, their water chemistry is more for irrigation, but it's so in depth that I'll just love it. You know, so I like to look at the water chemistry. So one thing, just from a common sense standpoint, if you've got a dock, go out and measure the visibility. Take a Secchi disc. If you don't have one, buy one or make one. Look it up, Secchi disc, SECCHI, Secchi disc. That is a must-have tool in pond management. Look at the visibility of your water. If you get into the warmer months and visibility is less than 18 inches, then you need to be looking at your nutrient levels and decide what to do about it. If your water visibility is 18 inches to 30 inches, that's pretty well perfect. You know, the nutrient levels, you look at those to decide whether or not to fertilize, but you can look at water clarity and decide whether or not to fertilize, depending on where you are. Ron Arduano, it's time to fertilize because water temperatures are 65 plus down there in South Louisiana, but some lakes are still turbid from recent rains and visibility is about 8 inches, and fertilizing may not produce blooms at that clarity. Should we wait for at least 24 inches of visibility for efficient sunlight penetration? No, I don't think you need to wait for 24 inches, but if you wait for 15 or 16, then you can still create a plankton bloom, and as the water clarity increases from the muddy turbidity, then it's going to manage better for the plankton bloom. You don't need to wait for 24 inches. Just wait for 15, 16 inches and do that. All right, now I want to go back here. Let's see, Aaron Gilbreth. Let's see what Aaron's got here. I'm trying to create a pond that is 1.5 acres for primarily crappie only. Good luck. There are currently some hybrid crappie, but we catch mostly bluegill and green sunfish and a few bass. If we stocked 50 adult black crappie in a lake, would stocking tilapia help produce bait fish for crappie? Or what would you suggest for stocking for bait fish? Well, for those that watch this show pretty often, ouch, I just banged my foot. I'm not much of a fan of crappie in small waters, but the good news with a 1.5 acre pond, it's when they mess it up, you can change it pretty easy. So now, if you want to stock 50 adult black crappie, keep in mind that they're predator fish limited by their mouth size. You know, where a largemouth bass can eat a 10-inch bass, a crappie can't eat a 10-inch bass. So full-grown crappie might eat a 3-inch bluegill. But, so they feed a little bit lower on the food chain, so they're going to have a tendency to decimate the food chain before the food chain becomes significant. You know, and so to answer your question, I'm just going to stick with the question. Would stocking tilapia help produce bait fish? Yes. Now, here's the catch-22. If you're south of a line, say from about Waco to Alexandria, Louisiana, to Jackson, Mississippi, on over to Birmingham, and then scoot over to Atlanta, and then run up the Atlantic seaboard. If you're south of that line, odds go up that the tilapia won't die in the wintertime. And you really want them to. You don't want to trade problems. So, here we go. I do want to circle back. We got 4 minutes left. Let's see here. Dan Reasoner, Bob says, what do you recommend to put up across the end of a tank dam where water runs around to keep my fish from swimming out? I would not put anything up. I would widen the spillway so when it does run, it runs shallow. If you're going to lose fish, typically you're going to lose your young of the year, which can be easily replenished. Now, that's if your water's running less than 12 inches deep. If your water's running a foot deep, you stand a chance to lose some of your prized game fish, especially if they don't have a good home to cling to. You know, but I've actually seen 3-acre ponds that were flooded with 6 feet of water standing on it for 2 weeks. And when he goes back down, didn't lose very many game fish because they didn't have a motive to leave. You know, what is a good happy water test kit? I like HACH, H-A-C-H, especially their fish farmer test kit. Look that up. It's kind of pricey, but if you're into it, you're worth it. Look at there. Vito put the link up. Attaboy. Does shade, let's see what Chuck says here. Does shade or predominant wind direction play into where you should place a diffuser? No, it does not. You place the diffuser into the proper depth of water based on and the number of diffusers is based on the size of the lake and the shape of the lake. Now, all these aeration companies out there, Vertex, Casco, you know, Otterbein, all those good aeration companies, they'll design a system for you, for your pond. They'll go to Google Earth, find your pond, look at it, ask you the depths, and they will help you design an efficient system. Go to pondboss.com and click on the resource guide and look at all the different vendors there, and you'll see some people that'll help you. All right, let's see. Frank says 4 Canada geese chow down on his fish food. Duck's not a problem, but they're woodies. Yeah, woodies aren't going to mess with your fish food. They're real skittish. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I want to go back to aeration. There's a number of ways to aerate. There's bottom diffused aeration. You can pump water like Dave Weber was talking about. I don't recommend that because it costs too much. You've got water circulators where you can circulate the water horizontally, even down deep. I'm trying to learn from a company called Molear, M-O-L-E-A-R, wrote an article in Pond Boss a few issues back where they're using nano bubbles. I'm not quite sure the impact, and that's a kind of a pricey unit, but we're looking at that. There's not only water circulators, but there's fountains. So you can circulate water horizontally, diagonally, up and down. You know, you can have fountains. Some of them draft 5 or 6 feet deep. Most of them don't. Fountains are more for show than aeration. There's paddle wheel aerators. So if you're needing to look at aeration, think about it some. What's the mission? What's the purpose? And if you know why you need aeration, what your mission is, if you want to push the thermocline down, or if you want to minimize the risk of a fish kill, you know, think about the reason you want an aeration system, and then you can pick out the right vendor and the right people to help you decide how to build it and how to do it. So I'm going to start wrapping things up at 7:29. Hey, you guys know the drill. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Click like. Share this on your timeline. You're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat. I'll get Leanne to do the drawing next week, and a Pond Boss mug that knows how to say it with me. Keep hot things hot and cold things cold. I always appreciate you guys watching this show with me, and it's just so much fun to do it. You guys energize me, keep me going, and I love it. $35 a year. If you haven't signed up, please do that. $35. I'm telling you, it's cheaper than a Friday night date and lasts a lot longer, lasts a year. So with that, I'm going to tell you adios, and I'm not sure where I'll be next Wednesday, but I know this, I'll be with you. So adios for now. Thanks for watching.